Welcome back to the PFF NFL show. Trevor, Sikkema, Dalton, Wasserman here with you guys on a free agency frenzy Monday. The tampering period is open, and Dalton, so are the floodgates for NFL news. So much so that Twitter is down, which is a great time for one of the top social media platforms to be down when we're trying to cover this business the best we can on one of the biggest news days of the year. I'm not mad about it. Please don't write that I'm mad about it. Look, we're going to have fun on this show regardless. We have multiple sources where we can get our news and talk about what's happening around the NFL, so don't you guys worry about it. We're going to see you guys in the chat, and we would love to have just a big conversation with everybody and freak out with you guys, give our analysis of what we think of these players that are either retained by their teams or going to new spots. So anytime there's a signing or something, please shout it out in the chat. Dalton, how you doing, my friend? Did you get multiple cups of coffee in? How do you feel today?
Oh, I don't do coffee. I feel pretty good, though. I mean, it's been a whirlwind. And honestly, it's been a whirlwind since, Friday or Saturday with all the other news we've gotten. Deebo Samuel, Myles Garrett, Geno Smith, DK Metcalf. I mean, it just feels like a continuation of a wild weekend we had in the NFL. And, I thought maybe we'd get to 1 o'clock in this show. We'd have a few moves in the first hour. We'd go over some things. No, you're right. The floodgates absolutely open, and it's about to be a whirlwind of a few days here.
So there's obviously a lot of big moves that happened even before today that we're going to get to, that we're going to give you guys our analysis on. So we'll get back to some of those big trades, the Geno trade, the DK Metcalf trade, a bunch of stuff like that. But we'll also react to the news of the day as well. We need some help because it's a massive day. So one of our producers, Eli, is on the mic behind the glass, and he's going to sort of be that voice from the heavens, if you will, and he's just going to shout at us when big news is breaking, because we'll probably be in conversations one way or another when it comes to analyzing a lot of these moves. But Eli, is the mic plugged in? Are you plugged into whatever social media or news platform you need to be? Because it's about to be a massive 90 minutes, my friend. How you feeling? How's the mic?
We're ready to rock, gentlemen. We're ready. Let's get into it.
You gave us. I just want to give. I think offensive line is a good place to have this conversation because we see a lot of people in the chat already talking about offensive line, some of the moves that have been made, and I kind of want to start there. But the Tennessee Titans recently, when I say recently, I mean 4 minutes ago, Dan Moore, the offensive tackle from the Pittsburgh Steelers, being signed by the Tennessee Titans for, what was it, 4 years, $82 million? And Eli got in our ear about that, and our reactions were exactly the same. We basically just went, what? So that was probably one of the biggest overpays that we have here. But let's start with the Titans. Let's start right there with the Titans. They needed an upgrade along the offensive line. They're a team that has a top pick here. They also have a top pick when it comes to the second round. But Dalton, a lot of the moves that have been made along the offensive line feel like they are telling me that the league does not think very highly of this offensive tackle class. Do you think those two things are related? Talk to me about the Dan Moore signing, and feel free to get into any other offensive line signings as we kind of just try to make a conversation about everything that we're seeing today.
I think it's that in part, but I think it's also something where we know the Tennessee Titans are not taking an offensive tackle anyway with the number 1 overall pick, right? We're kind of assuming at this point it's going to be either Abdul Carter, the edge rusher, Travis Hunter, the receiver/corner, or Cam Ward, the quarterback. And especially if they're thinking about Cam Ward or even Shedeur Sanders, you have to find a way to protect him, right? The interesting part for Dan Moore Jr. to me is he's played his entire 4-year career at left tackle. The Titans made a big thing about moving J.C. Latham, who played right tackle at Alabama, over to left tackle this past season next to Peter Skoronski. So which one of them moves over? Because generally, I know, we have a few exceptions, Lane Johnson and guys like that, but generally right tackles aren't paid the money that Dan Moore Jr. just got paid. So does that mean Latham's flipping over to the right side where the Titans have a huge need and Moore slots in next to Skoronski on the left side? I think you have a fascinating development both in the maybe you mentioned it might be an overpay for a player who's got, he had a career high grade this season at 67.2, but certainly that's nothing world beating and not something that would usually get you $20+ million a year. So I think it is a bit of a gamble they're taking. It's now a very expensive offensive line with Moore, with Lloyd Cushenberry at center, and then with the 2 first-round picks from the last couple of years, like I just mentioned. So it throws a wrench in things, and it feels like, especially with the Ravens re-signing Ronnie Stanley and the Rams re-signing Alaric Jackson, teams are really fishing for answers at tackle right now.
Yeah, totally. You throw in, I can't remember if you just mentioned this, but like Jalen Moore, who filled in a little bit for Trent Williams when he was with the San Francisco 49ers, signing with the Kansas City Chiefs, 2 years, $30 million deal. I mean, I feel like that's a lot of money for a player that's relatively unproven there, but it goes back to how desperate Kansas City was to get some sort of offensive tackle in there. But that to me, like along with, the Ronnie Stanley news is obviously the big one because I think he was the biggest fish in the offensive tackle pond. But Dan Moore getting the money that he's getting, Jalen Moore getting the number that he is getting when it comes to free agency. I do believe that with the salary cap going up, teams are just willing to pay a little bit more. They're just very comfortable with it overall. But these are also teams that I feel could have comfortably drafted a good offensive tackle, and maybe they still will in the draft, and maybe it's just a matter of them being a little bit lower in the draft order. But let's rope the Chicago Bears in here as well, right? Chicago Bears, for one, I absolutely love what they did. They go out and they trade for Jonah Jackson. They go out and they trade for Joe Thuney. Now they signed Drew Dalton, which I know is a signing that you love, so I want to get to that in a second. But the Bears just have zero desire, it feels like, to draft an offensive lineman in the first round, especially at number 10. Like, they don't feel like an offensive lineman is worth it for them. I just wonder if the way that free agency tells us a lot about what NFL teams believe about the NFL draft. And this free agency period is telling me that teams really don't like this offensive line class at all. We thought it might just be the offensive guard class, but I think the offensive tackle class as well. I think that the league believes a lot of these guys are interior players, and they're not even waiting around for that transition for those guys to go inside. So that is one of the big themes and takeaways that I have from the day, is that this league is just not very high on this offensive line class at all whatsoever.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think especially at tackle, and we've talked about it a lot scouting these tackles, is which guys are staying out there due to length issues or what have you, and which guys are moving to the inside. I mean, I think you're still going to get 4 or 5 of them probably taken in the first round. I think it's just they're not as highly regarded. I think you mentioned it, Jalen Moore being $15 million a year to the Chiefs as a guy who's been, a spot starter for San Francisco filling in for Trent Williams. I think the Chiefs were a prime spot with Ronnie Stanley re-signed at Baltimore, where I go, okay, could that be a Josh Connerly? Could that be a Josh Simmons? I think the first couple of guys, when you talk about Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks and Armand Membu, they're still going to go really high, but I think it speaks to the lack of depth in this class, right? So you're talking about teams that don't want to rely on rookies as immediate answers. Maybe you still see the Chiefs take a tackle, right? Because they've got an extremely expensive offensive line. I don't know that Jawan Taylor's got more than 1 year left in Kansas City himself. So I think teams are trying to build depth maybe more so with this offensive line class and find stars in the back half of the first or early part of the second round. But you mentioned the Chicago Bears too. You have to just love what they're doing. I think that's really indifferent to the draft class. Even I know you've talked about maybe moving Will Campbell into center there, but I think they've just found 3 players who are fantastic fits for them. And the Bears, Ben Johnson is doing everything he can to surround Caleb Williams with everything he needs. I think he's doing it absolutely right.
Yep, I agree with you. Eli's already in my ear saying that he's got 2 signings to announce. So what do we got, Eli?
We've got Carlton Davis to the Patriots for 3 years, $60 million, 34.5 guaranteed. And then we don't have the numbers, but we have Milton Williams going to the Panthers.
Okay, Panthers making a big splash. We figured that they would. We've talked about them potentially as the team holding the number 8 overall pick, maybe even being a landing spot for Mason Graham. If he potentially makes it there, it's a lot more likely that they get an edge rusher that they want than Mason Graham. But now that they have Milton Williams to play inside next to Derek Brown, that really frees them up. This is also a team that so this is a good conversation to have too. J.C. Horn also signs with the Carolina Panthers today, so it's been a huge day for Carolina. They've made one big splash with a new addition, but they made another big splash bringing back a guy like J.C. Horn. Now, Horn's only played in 37 games over the last 4 years, and he's entering that final year of his deal. We saw his fellow classmate Patrick Surtain II get a record-setting deal when he was signed not long ago. Now, J.C. Horn resets the market with a 4-year, $100 million plus type of a deal. Now he is the highest paid corner in football. I think that the sticker shock on that one is a lot because of how much he has missed time over the last couple of years. But I said this on Twitter, RIP, that you have Sauce Gardner, you have Derek Stingley Jr., and you have Trent McDuffie. All of those guys, you throw Deron Bland in there as well if you want to. all four of those guys could potentially be signing deals next offseason. So you're essentially trying to get ahead of that when you know the cap is probably going to go up again next year. So those guys are probably all going to reset the market. So you're just trying to get ahead of it because not only did they believe in J.C. Horn clearly, but in 1 year, J.C. Horn's deal might go from being the highest paid corner in the NFL to the fourth highest, barely even top five. So they're trying to get the value there and get the deal done early. So I get the vision, even though it is still very risky. Curious what everybody in the chat says to that. Wow, J47 said Javon Holland to Carolina coming soon. Could be prediction, could be an insider. J47, if you hit it, we're going to give you credit for it. You nailed it before Schefter did, so if you hit it, we're going to give you credit there. But what do you think about them re-signing Horn? And then them also going out and making a huge splash for a guy like Milton Williams.
Yeah, I think, look, re-signing J.C. Horn, look, he's obviously at least an above-average player when he is healthy, right, if not one of the elite corners in football. And this Panther defense, look, you have to, obviously they have to fill a ton of spots. It was the lowest graded defense in football last year. But I think when you look at what they're trying to build, you still have to have stars, right? So now you have three of them in theory with Derek Brown, Milton Williams, and J.C. Horn. You have three stars. Now you just got to fill in the rest around it, right? So I think Milton Williams also is a perfect complement to Derek Brown. You're talking about a guy who led the league in pass rush grade this past season. Derek Brown, his last healthy season in 2023, was second in the league in run defense grade. So you have a really good complement with those two guys. It frees them up with that 8th overall pick to go either edge rusher or corner, or possibly, I still think, receivers on the board if somebody like Tetero and McMillan were sitting there. And I'm curious now to see. I don't think the Panthers – Javon Holland would certainly be fun. It would give them a star-laden defense that they need to fill out the depth of in the draft. I still don't know that they're the favorites to do that. But you get this sense of like, okay, they're trying to make impact moves on this defense, right? They're trying to fill it out. Bryce Young, they really like the progress of what happened, of the second half of last year and how much he improved down the stretch and his confidence. So I think they're still going to have to ride the balance of making this team as optimally, efficient for Bryce Young on the offensive side while filling out this defense that needs a ton of work. But if Derek Brown is healthy, J.C. Horn is healthy, and Milton Williams keeps doing what he did last year, you're starting to get the makings of what could be a dangerous unit as long as you fill out the rest of it.
Yeah, I do think that the flexibility is fun now with Carolina, and I definitely don't think they're done. We were told that it was going to be a busy day from them, so I wonder if they're going to keep it coming, whether it's with Javon Holland or someone else. The New England Patriots, going back to the other update that Eli had there, signing Carlton Davis. So Carlton Davis goes from being the starting corner in Tampa Bay, getting traded over to the Detroit Lions, unfortunately getting hurt as part of a slew of injuries there with the Lions and them not making it to the Super Bowl this year. But now he's a free agent, so they knew that it was going to be a risk when they traded him. This was the risk ultimately with him going to the Patriots, although for the number that he signed for, the Lions got to feel pretty good about getting a pretty good comp pick there back for him. So now we set up a cornerback duo. Now remember, Mike Vrabel is now the defensive mind and head coach there that we have in New England. They've got Christian Gonzalez on one side. They've got Carlton Davis on the other. Those are guys that can be pretty scheme versatile for you, in my opinion. And then you pair that with the fact that, sorry, Walt, I see in the chat, he's not very happy about this. Robert Spillane also signing with the New England Patriots, being that second-level defender that can really do it all for you, and that's he's coming off a really good year, I think, for the Las Vegas Raiders, and so I think that's a big loss for them at the second level of their defense, but I think it's a big add for the Patriots, which sort of adds more flexibility. The corner spot is interesting because the Patriots have 4 picks within almost the top 75. They've got a first rounder, a second rounder, and then 2 third rounders. That last third rounder is Atlanta's that they traded Matthew Judon for, and that's pick number 77. So they've got 4 picks within the top 77, and you probably feel decent about your 2 starting corners, so you don't feel like you have to draft one of those guys in the second and third round. You can kind of just let the board fall to you a certain way. What do you think about Spillane and then also Carlton Davis being added to this Patriots defense?
Yeah, I think it speaks to right now the fact that New England missed out on some of these big-name receivers so far, right? When you talk about T. Higgins getting franchised, DK Metcalf getting sent to Pittsburgh, say even a Deebo Samuel getting sent to Washington, and we've yet to see them be able to emphasize the offensive side of the ball like we thought they might. They haven't signed an external offensive lineman yet either. So Mike Vrabel's taken the approach of like, look, okay, then I'll turn around when nobody else is looking at defense, and I'll build a pretty decent defense, right? And I don't think they have the worst defense in football even before those guys, right? You have good players. You have Keon White. You have Christian Gonzalez. does. You have guys like Jelani Tavai, right? They just signed Harold Landry as well, who gives them some edge depth. Kyle Duggar, Jabril Peppers. There is a lot of potential on this defense. It could be a very good unit if they're not put in so many bad positions by the offense. I'm still curious to see if they're going to sign, especially offensive linemen in free agency, maybe those guard spots, that right guard spot. Maybe you can move Mike Owenu out to tackle again if you want to do it that way. But I think that's the biggest thing for me is they go, okay, we're going to wait it out on the offensive line market when obviously we've seen a couple of overpays already. I think about a guy like Dan Moore Jr. Wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for the Patriots. I don't know that it makes a ton of sense for the Titans to sign Dan Moore Jr. for 4 years and $80 million. So the Patriots are going to stay patient. I think it slightly increases the likelihood that they're going to draft an offensive lineman 4th overall. But then you get curious about somebody like Travis Hunter, right? And you think about signing Carlton Davis. And you go, okay, what's the Patriots' opinions on him? Because we saw at the Combine, there's teams who think Hunter's a corner with a little bit of offense, and there's some teams who think Hunter's a receiver. Do the Patriots think he's a receiver, and could he be the 4th overall pick? And then maybe because you have Gonzalez and Davis as the starting corners, you use Hunter here and there to help you out on defense, but maybe he becomes your number 1 receiver if you take him 4th overall. I think there's a lot of dynamics that go into this with New England, but the fact that Vrabel's building this defense, and he's going to do that first to put his offense in better situations and find talent later in free agency or through the draft, I think it says a lot about his strategy and what he's trying to do.
Yeah, and we just got done talking about how I feel as though the league as a whole maybe doesn't view this offensive tackle class the way that we maybe once thought. But when you look at the Patriots specifically, that's what it feels like. The offensive line run could start there with them in the draft at number 4 overall. And with them signing Carlton Davis, signing Robert Spillane, and then also earlier this morning, they signed Harold Landry. So we've got multiple defensive additions now on this team. You're right. They've sort of tapped into the wide receiver market, tried to see if they could bring in a top-tier wide receiver. They can't. This is a team that has had a lot of money to spend. They've got going into free agency, had the most money to spend of any team in the NFL, and yet there are 3 pretty big signings in. None of them are offensive linemen, and a lot of offensive linemen around the league that would have been available in the pro market are sort of getting snatched up to the point where we're even seeing what we believe are overpays for Dan Moore Jr. and guys like Jalen Moore. So I think that the Travis Hunter conversation is obviously a great one if he makes it to them at number 4 overall. But if he doesn't, now this either feels like, in my opinion, offensive line or potentially Tetsuo McMillan, whatever the NFL thinks of these guys. I think wide receiver, unless they really love Tetsuo McMillan, it could be an opportunity for them to wait, draft one in the 3rd round with one of those 2 picks they have in the 3rd round, or even in the 2nd round. And then in the 1st round, they go with an Armand Membu, or they go with a Will Campbell or something like that, because they're not really making the splash on the offensive line that not only we thought they would, but let's be honest, Dalton, they need to. This is the worst offensive line in the NFL last year. You can't run this back. You've got to make multiple changes to this offensive line, whether it was in the draft or free agency. So they're obviously not done. They still got plenty of money to play with, but they need to really look into the offensive line market and try to find somebody that they could bring in with enough faith to say, like, yeah, we can start this guy right away, because last year just straight up wasn't good enough, and they've got to take that next step with Drake May.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was just thinking, some of those names you were mentioning, and depending on how far they go down, could that 4th spot be a trade down spot all of a sudden? Let's just say if for any reason one of the 2 quarterbacks doesn't go in the top 3, right? Could even trading down a few spots and getting some value, say a team like the Jets at 7, or maybe somebody else deeper down that's fishing for one of those 2 quarterbacks. Probably Shadur Sanders at this point, but we'll see which way that all goes come April. But that's one thing I wonder about, because even moving down a few spots, and I know Armand Membu's been a hot name, but if they want him, I feel like there is a possibility that they could slide down a handful of spots from number 4 and still get him. So I think it opens up a lot of possibilities for them. And look, the goal remains the same. They still have to surround Drake May with everything that he needs, but fixing this defense is certainly something done in Mike Vrabel fashion, right? If we have a good defense, I can be a little more patient with the offense. It's not going to be, a top 5 offense next year, no matter what we do this offseason, right? So taking a patient approach about it. They need things at every single spot: offensive line, receiver, even running back. They're going to probably take 1 or 2 guys in this draft also. So I think it just does speak to the approach of Mike Vrabel and wanting to be a balanced football team. And if it just so happens that this offseason he's really going to fix up the defense first, then so be it.
Walt, noted Raiders fan, not very happy in the chat, and he's just saying, you tell me, how did the Raiders not sign Robert Spillane? Don't really have a good answer for you. I don't really think there's a player on the roster right now that could do what Robert Spillane does. I mean, I like Devon Diablo, but he's also an unrestricted free agent, so maybe they're prioritizing bringing him back because he's going to cost you less money. But who else they got on the roster? Amari Burney, Tommy Eichenberg. Those aren't Charles Snowden. He's kind of like an edge player now, though. But I don't know. Letting Robert Spillane go, I think, is tough for the Raiders. Outside of just them not thinking that he fits whatever defensive structure they want to have with the new regime. But to me, that's a tough one. We can stay with the Raiders. Actually, you know what? Let's answer this question. Somebody said, who are the best offensive linemen who are still available, right? Who haven't gotten signed? Cam Robinson's out there. Tyron Smith is out there, but he's coming off a tough year from the New York Jets. Morgan Moses is still out there. If you want to take a chance on a Jedrick Wills, I guess you could. He's still out there to be signed. Some interior offensive linemen. Will Fries is really intriguing to me. Kevin Zeitler, James Daniels, Mekhi Becton, Brandon Scherf, Tevin Jenkins, Aaron Banks. So we definitely still have some interior offensive linemen that are on the board. Starting caliber offensive tackles. Normally, those guys aren't on the market very long, and the guys that are still there, they're risk one way or the other. So those are a handful of players who are still available there. Actually, before we go to the Raiders, because I want to get back to the Raiders, I want to talk a little bit about Geno Smith, and then I want to bring that into the DK Metcalf conversation with the DK Metcalf trade. But before we get there, you were talking about this in one of our work Slack channels, and I agree with you. The Jags signing Jordan Lewis to be one of the highest paid nickel defenders in the league. I don't really get this one from the Jags perspective because Jerry Jones played well for them in the slot last year. He played fine. I don't want to say that he was elite. How could you do this? He played fine as a rookie. Now I guess you're bumping him to outside corner. So it's like him and Monteric Brown, I think, are now maybe going to fight for that outside cornerback spot. But Jerry played mostly in the slot this past year. He played mostly in the slot his last year at Florida State. Both of those years, by far his best year as a corner. And the two previous years when he was an outside corner at Florida State, he did not grade very well as an outside corner. So I don't hate them adding Jordan Lewis in a vacuum. Ultimately, I now don't really know what this does with Jerry Jones, but maybe they think differently of him. What do you think?
Well, I wonder if it's, especially for the money that it was for, I have to wonder if Jordan Lewis is actually the guy that moves to the outside, right? I'm trying to find how much he's played on the outside lately, but I mean, that's what you do have, and it feels like right now what they're trying to do is just add talent in. I mean, Lewis had the 8th best coverage grade in the league this past season. Again, playing mostly in the slot. Jerry Jones was a rookie at a really good run defense grade, mediocre coverage grade, but you're talking about a Jacksonville team that just didn't execute very well all the way around, right? I think that would be the question for me, but Lewis too. He's played in the slot pretty much his whole career outside of his rookie year. So I'm with you. I'm curious to see how they fit it all in with two guys that figure to fit better on the inside. Because obviously you're not going to have two really high, I don't want to say highly paid because Jerry Jones was a mid-round pick, but highly regarded slot corners on the same team. Which of them moves outside? I would think it would be Jordan Lewis with what they paid him, but I'm not sure. Or this new staff just doesn't think all that highly of Jerry Jones. I'm not sure, but it does seem like an odd fit when I think about maybe for a little bit more they could have got a true outside corner, maybe like a DJ Reed. They also, I wonder if they're in on Javon Holland. They had the lowest graded group of safeties in the league this past year, so I don't think they're done yet, but it is a little bit puzzling because you're going to need to move one of these guys outside to make it fit in this defense.
Let's go back to the Raiders because I do want to touch on the Raiders because a move that I absolutely loved them making. I love them going out and get Pete Carroll. I know Walt's not very happy with this. I do like John Spytek. He was the right-hand man for Jason Light for many, many years. He had a lot of input on how they built that team, and so I think he's got the right approach to it, even though losing out on Spillane definitely stings. That could be a miss for them, but I like their hiring in him as their general manager. And I love the fact that they traded for Geno Smith. I don't know why Seattle was so quick to move on to Geno Smith. And maybe so quick is probably the wrong words, because I don't know why they entertained this. It felt like the whole time that Geno Smith was playing well for them, it was like, yeah, but... And I don't really know where they were getting the but from. There have been rumors and swirlings of Geno Smith being available for trade even going back to last year. And I don't really understand it. Even this past year, with a horrendous interior offensive line, Geno Smith had the 5th highest wins above replacement metric that we have over at PFF. He had an 83.2 passing grade. He's been a fantastic quarterback over the last 2-3 years. And to get him for a 3rd-round pick, to me, is just great value and great business by the Raiders, who were basically staring down the barrel of, okay, maybe we go out and sign Sam Darnold, but every team in the NFL that needs a quarterback is going to want to sign Sam Darnold. And they're sitting there at number 6 overall and aren't in the driver's seat for picking the quarterback that they want in this draft. So to me, getting Geno the way they did for the price that they did, and even with the extension, this was a home run job by the Las Vegas Raiders to give themselves an option here with Geno Smith. So I thought that was a brilliant move by them. What do you think about Geno? Do you think he was worth the trade compensation and the extension? Just give me your thoughts here.
Yeah, no, I think when you look at it in the numbers context of giving up the 92nd overall pick for a borderline top 10 quarterback, how could you not love that if you're the Raiders, right? And I know there's some that think maybe it doesn't necessarily exclude them from taking one of the quarterbacks if they're at the 6th overall pick if they want. But now I sit here and think about possibilities for their offense, right? When you think about maybe a Teteroa McMillan to fill out the receiving core, and you've got him and Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers. Maybe it's an Ashton Jeanty to really beef up the run game. And I think the biggest thing for Geno is he's going to a team that very quietly has a much, much better offensive line than he had to deal with, especially this past year in Seattle. The amount that he had to do under pressure and under constant pressure this year, we saw it late in the season. Their interior offensive line was the reason that they missed the postseason, right? So if he goes to this Raiders team, he's protected. They put a run game together. Maybe they get a number 1 receiver at that 6th overall pick. You've got Jacoby Myers. You've got Brock Bowers. All of a sudden, there's some real possibilities for this to be at least a competing with the rest of the AFC West level offense, right? The back 7 on their defense, like we already talked about, needs a ton of work. But I think about Geno's ability to throw downfield, how much better he's gotten even in the last 3 years. This year, just a 2.6% turnover-worthy play rate. You're talking about the same turnover-worthy play rate as a guy like Josh Allen on top of all the big-time throws he gives you. So, look, I think Geno, as far as improving, are we expecting the Raiders to compete for a Super Bowl this year anyway? No, certainly not with their defense, right? But Pete Carroll, Tom Brady, John Spytek, they're building this thing, right? And I think to get Geno in there to significantly raise the floor on this offense, because we talked about it when we did the season preview for the Raiders. They walked in last year with Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew, and we said, yeah, that's not going to work. I mean, their season was over before it started. And I know they had Bowers and they always have Max Crosby, but with that quarterback situation, it was over before it started. Now you have Geno Smith, who, take it for what it's worth. If you think he's top 10, top 12, I think he's almost certainly in the top 15. He's a viable starter, and he's proven it for 3 years in sometimes not the best play calling situation in Seattle and sometimes not the best offensive line situation. Now he can get a little bit more stability, and I think there's still a lot left in the tank for him. I think he's going to go there and play well. I expect him to fill out running back in the draft one way or the other, and I'm very curious to see what they do with that 6th overall pick.
I'm doing some quick math right now because I'm reading in the chat. Asol is saying local media in Seattle has reported that Geno's team basically ended contract negotiations, didn't have any intention of having any talks there, saying that Seattle offered $40 to $45 million per year, but Geno's team said no, with no rooms for negotiations or counteroffers there from the Seahawks. That's potentially why they end up moving on from him. Geno was playing on a 3-year, $75 million deal, so $25 million per season. Now, he has proved himself since then. That was sort of like an extension of a prove-it deal there, and he has proved himself worthy of that. He's 35 years old, but I still think he's got something left in the tank. If that is true, that they were, offering him $40 to $45 million a year, for Geno Smith, that's not even, let's see, that would be 40 to 45 million let's say if it was 40, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So if he were to get $40 million a year, he would be the 15th highest paid quarterback in the NFL. And if it was up to 45, then he would have been the 11th highest paid quarterback in the NFL. And that's with the salary cap going up, and that's with a lot of contracts of guys who have previously signed those contracts for those average year numbers. So if Seattle was like, hey, yeah, we think you're $40 to $45 million, like, I can understand why he might have said, nope, somebody else will pay me more money than that. Somebody else will pay me top 10 quarterback money somewhere else. And he's 35. He spent a lot of his career as a backup, so he's trying to make up as much money as possible. So that makes a lot of sense. I wonder what Seattle's going to do now, because they sort of seem like the favorite for Sam Darnold, but Sam Darnold behind that interior offensive line is bad, like really bad. So they would have to make major changes to their interior offensive line for me to feel good about Sam Darnold going there. I mean, even like Aaron Rodgers going there as well. Like I don't really like any of the quarterback options in the free agent pool more than I would have liked getting some sort of deal done with Geno. Maybe he just was like, yeah, I'm not going back to Seattle no matter what. But I can also understand if that was Seattle's starting point, him saying, nope, I'm not entertaining this conversation. So I don't exactly know where the truth is. I think there's a lot of reporting that happens on different sides, and sometimes the truth is in the middle. Sometimes you don't even hear it. But
got
all
some
in all,
news,
I think
Trev.
What'd you say?
We've got Morgan Moses to the Patriots on a 3-year, $24 million deal, up to $28.5 million.
Okay. All right. I like this for the Patriots. It's at least something. It's at least a veteran. It's at least getting a different body in there. We just had this conversation 10 minutes ago saying that the Patriots just have to get somebody different in there. So Pat's clearly emptying the bank account here this morning and using a lot of that salary cap that they had to bring in some different guys. What do you think about this one?
I think it's a really solid move, and as he has for pretty much his entire career, Moses is kind of an anchor at that right tackle spot, gives you a lot of stability. 69.2 pass blocking grade this past year, but that's really dragged down by just 2 bad games he had. One against the 49ers, one against the Bills. So still an above average pass protector. Played through some injuries last year, I believe, as well with the Jets, but he's always just been a rock solid player, right? Maybe not necessarily a guy you think about as an all-pro, but the old saying is in this building, right, creep back towards average with your offensive line. So if you're looking at a right side with Morgan Moses, with Michael Wenu at right guard, David Andrews probably still at center, then you figure out the left side. Now, okay, you have one tackle spot that you have to fill in. Little surprising that he got a 3-year deal at his age, but I think just to add some level of stability while they continue to find young players who can fill in and who can eventually start when guys like Wenu start to go, when Morgan Moses starts to go. David Andrews, also an older player. You have Cole Strange at left guard. So when you're looking at their starting offensive line, you're looking at one more spot, and that's that left tackle spot. And now, again, we start the speculation on who are they going to draft? Could it be Will Campbell, 4th overall? Could they trade down? Could it be Armand Membu, and maybe you flip him over to the left side? I think there's plenty of options here, but getting Moses in there at least temporarily for the next year or two gives him a stopgap, gives him a viable starter at that right tackle spot, and makes things a little bit easier for Drake May.
Also seeing in the chat that apparently the Milton Williams deal is not set in stone. And there are some other teams now getting in on the conversation for his services. So the ink is not dry in Carolina, or the ink maybe, didn't even get to the paper, it seems like, maybe with this Milton Williams deal. So we'll continue to keep you guys updated on that as we see him. But shoot, if you guys see something, fire it off in the chat. And obviously we'll react to it here on the show as well. I do want to go back to the Seattle Seahawks and the connection that they have now. Man, a lot of roster changes. They moved on from a handful of guys, Tyler Lockett included. They obviously moved on from Geno Smith. They also moved on from DK Metcalf. They traded him to the Pittsburgh Steelers for a 2nd-round pick. They get number 52 overall in this year's draft class. And then the Steelers signed him to a 5-year, $150 million extension. He is the latest wide receiver to get the $30 million per year average. Dalton, what did you think about this trade? Because I'm going to be honest with you, unless the Steelers trade George Pickens for some sort of return, maybe like a 3rd rounder or something, I think this is crazy. I think this is bad business by the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're getting a good receiver, but you traded a near top 50 pick for a wide receiver who has the same skill set as a receiver that you already have, who is younger and currently on a rookie deal. And you also traded for the receiver who by far leads the NFL in penalties for the position since he came into the league in 2019. He has more than double the accepted penalties against him that the second place guy has, which, oh, by the way, the second place guy is George Pickens. So you basically had this same receiver in every single way, and you decided to go trade a near premium top 50 pick and give him $30 million a year on a 5-year deal. I just don't know how. I don't really know how the DK Metcalf deal makes the Pittsburgh Steelers better. That's my whole thing. We are very cautious about the value of trading for a guy just to then still sign him to a lot of money. That's really tough to find instances where that's totally worth it for you. Sometimes it is. I don't really think it is for the Steelers because, again, not that I think the DK Metcalf is a bad player. I think he's a good wide receiver. I don't really know how this makes your team any different. And instead, it just costs you draft capital and salary cap to make it happen. So I am not a fan of this deal at all whatsoever for the Pittsburgh Steelers, even though I do like the player that they are acquiring. What do you think about this deal, Dalton, and sort of how it got to this point?
It is weird on their end, right? Because they're the two players that led the league this past season in deep receiving grade. And I think what it brings into question is, okay, really, to me, it makes them better when you consider what their number 2 options were last year when you think about Mike Williams and Van Jefferson and all the other receivers that really just weren't doing much for them aside from Pickens. So it makes the receiving core, I think, a hell of a lot better, but it brings into question, what are they going to do at quarterback? Who fits this the best? And the weirdest part about it, when you really look at the way they ran their offense last year and chucking up go balls to George Pickens and doing all that, the best quarterback that might fit with this is actually Russell Wilson. Based on, he had the best deep passing grade in the league last year. If they want to get vertical, he proved that he could do it. That was the element that he brought that Justin Fields didn't at the beginning of the season. But it seems like they would rather have Fields than Wilson. It seems like they'd rather have an Aaron Rodgers than Wilson. And I think with Metcalf making so much money, and eventually Pickens is either going to make money or get traded, what is the long-term answer? I think what it is it makes them better as an offense, right? Because having a DK Metcalf makes you better than if you don't, obviously. Although the 52nd overall pick is pretty costly. You probably could have got a receiver with that pick. But I still have major questions about their quarterback situation. And I still have major questions about their offensive tackle situation and protecting what quarterback is trying to throw the ball deep this much, right? So I think you had a threefold problem. You needed a number 2 receiver. You need to figure out who your quarterback is. And yeah, you better hope Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu that they pan out at tackle, because then you have a real problem no matter who your receivers are if you can't protect them. It's a drastic step. I think schematically, I'm with you on that part. Is I still don't know what their offense looks like, right? Because you can't live week to week relying on chucking up go balls, right? It's why they were so hot to start with Wilson, and then they didn't score more than 17 points in any of the last 5 games. You can't be so reliant on the home run ball like that, and it feels like Metcalf, for as great as he is, because he's fantastic, it feels like it just leans more into that philosophy, especially if you have a team that can't run the ball very well and they don't run a whole lot of play action the way that we saw Arthur Smith do in Atlanta. So talent-wise, does it make them better? Absolutely. Schematically, I still have no idea where they go from here between their offensive tackle situation and whoever in the world's going to play quarterback for them.
Yeah, to me, it makes the most sense if Russ is still your quarterback, because that's how Russell Wilson wins as a quarterback. He's just the moonball captain. And so, I mean, if you had George Pickens and DK Metcalf, I suppose that's your offense. It's pretty volatile, and I think that would get really frustrating for your defensive coordinator specifically, because you might have a lot of 3-and-outs if things don't really go well for you, because you're throwing a lot of jump balls up there. But yeah, I think the rumors are out there about potentially Aaron Rodgers being the quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And to me, that makes less sense now about what your receiver room looks like. Now, obviously, we've got a lot of time here to see what their team building strategy could be. They could be looking to trade George Pickens for a different asset, then get a different type of wide receiver in there. I like Roman Wilson, who they have, and I was sort of surprised at how little action he got even when he was back from being hurt last season. So he could get into the mix. If they move George Pickens on from a different type of a wide receiver, maybe I would like that better, especially if Rodgers is there instead of Russell Wilson. But again, it's just do I like DK Metcalf? Yes, of course I like DK Metcalf. I don't really know how much better this makes your team relative to what you had to do to make this happen. So we'll see how the rest of the offseason plays out. But right now, I don't love that deal there. We do have another deal that I get to announce here, and that's your boy, former New York Jet, DJ Reed, signing with the Detroit Lions. 3 years, $48 million, $32 million guaranteed. So Reed, one of the better CB2s in the NFL. Now he gets to go to the Detroit Lions in a cornerback rotation that will include Terrion Arnold on one side, hopefully a healthy Ennis Rakestraw Jr. as well. What do you think about the sort of the turnover that we've had here with the Detroit Lions and them still going out to make sure that cornerback position is as good as it can be there with DJ Reed? What's he got left in the tank to bring to Detroit?
I like this move a lot, and it's funny with DJ Reed because you talk about corners and it being such a position with such volatility when it comes to production, right? It can be year in and year out something different, even for corners at the top end of the talent spectrum. But DJ Reed's put up a 70-plus PFF grade in 6 straight seasons, and in each of the last 4, he's played at least 800 snaps. This is, as much as any corner in football, somebody that you know what you're getting out of him, right? He's unafraid of man-to-man situations. Obviously, a lot of experience in his old days with Seattle and even with Robert Saleh with the Jets in zone coverage. I think he's someone who, when you're talking about the young players that you have alongside the Lions and all the injuries that they had too this past year, you think about Terrion Arnold, you think about Ennis Rakestraw, now Carlton Davis is gone, but you get DJ Reed in there. I think stability in this secondary on the outside is a big thing that he brings, So you talk about now what it looks like if you get a year of development out of Terrion Arnold. It was a tough rookie year, but he was under a lot of pressure. You still have Rakestraw. You still have arguably the best pair of safeties in the NFL on the back end, and now you start to zone in on, okay, this team's going to take a pass rusher in the draft, aren't they? Now with releasing Zadarius Smith, maybe I think there's been some conversations about coming back at a lower price, but now you talk about with Reed in there and hopefully Terrion Arnold taking a jump in year 2, we really lock in on 1, the back end of this defense getting healthy, the back 7, and 2, finding, and Aiden Hutchinson getting healthy, and then finding other pass rushers alongside Aiden Hutchinson who can really give you 3 levels on that defense that's a threat.
Yeah, somebody in the chat saying the Amik Robertson disrespect is real. You're right. I thought Amik Robertson was unrestricted free agent. He's not a free agent until next year. I forgot that he has signed a 2-year deal instead of 1. I like Amik Robertson, so I'm throwing him in there
real quick, I think about this too. Carlton Davis went to New England for $20 million a year, and they got DJ Reed for $16 a year. I mean, a significantly lower hit there. When you talk about, I think there's a very good argument that Reed's a better player, at least a more consistent player than Davis is.
We are on Milton Williams' watch officially. Eagles free agent defensive tackle Milton Williams in talks with the Arizona Cardinals as well as the Minnesota Vikings. The deal with the Carolina Panthers is not done. So this is our Anchorman Panda Watch version. We're just on Milton Williams' watch here on the show. We'll see if we end up getting through this whole show without him being signed, or if we get to the very end and that's the prize for everybody sticking around for a while there. Hey, before we get to some more free agent news, because there's a lot of other stories that I sort of want to dig into that have lasting effects. I mean, the Myles Garrett extension is a big one that I think we need to talk about, especially for the NFL draft. Khalil Mack going back to the Los Angeles Chargers. We're going to touch on that. Before we get to that, got a question for everybody watching here. What does your child's future success look like? I've talked to your parent, the parents out there. Is it your kids traveling the world? Is it a job that they love? Is it them just living a very comfortable, happy life? Well, no matter what it is, you can help them achieve that with a kids investment account from Fabric by Gerber Life. By making a contribution to your child's future today, you can help give them the means to pursue those dreams, both big and small. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With the Kids Investment Account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. Kids can't invest while they're minors, but this Kids Investment Account allows you to invest on their behalf and gives those investments more time to grow. Whole thing is online. It's very easy to set up. Could take you just 5 minutes, and then you just manage your child's account and monitor those investments right from your phone. The funds can be used for nearly anything, from tuition, tutors, music classes, sports, and then when they're adults, maybe it's helping them buy their first car, their first house, starting a business, whatever leads to their happiness, like we were talking about earlier. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL, meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. Portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, I feel like I have to check like 18 different chats the second I take my eyes off of something to redo the ad read. So I'm like catching up on what happened 45 seconds earlier. Let's touch on the Myles Garrett extension really quick. So Myles Garrett, he says that he wants out of Cleveland. He's Super Bowl week. He's making his tours around Media Row, going on different radio stations. He's even talking about his fit with the Washington Commanders with Mina Kimes, which, wow, we got to get to the Commanders signing Javon Kinlaw to that much money here in a second, but we're getting ahead of ourselves there. He signs a 4-year extension, so 6 years total because he had 2 years left on his deal. $40 million average per year. That's nuts for a non-quarterback. No trade clause involved. You see a lot of the details of the deal that's right there. I mean, he basically just becomes the most valuable, highest paid, most powerful non-quarterback in the game. And that's what it took to get him to stay, to keep him happy. And even though he said that he wanted out of Cleveland, he wanted to shake things up, he wanted to go to a contender, you know what? At the end of the day, that much money talks, I'm not going to lie. So I get it. I understand it. My thought process now is I think Cam Ward's floor in this draft is number 2 overall. Especially, I don't know, because who else do they bring in now at this point, right? You got an insane amount of money wrapped up in Deshaun Watson. You have an insane amount of money now wrapped up in Myles Garrett. Now, they could be operating under the belief that they are going to basically get all of that money back from Deshaun Watson, because it was reported that it's like, okay, he re-injured his Achilles, he had a setback, he had to have the second surgery, and then the question becomes, all right, when and how did that happen? Because if it happened at the facility, there's nothing you could do about it. If it happened with him going out on his own and re-injuring himself, well, all of a sudden now a lot of that money becomes available for the Browns to be able to get back. So maybe they're operating as if they can get out of this Deshaun Watson contract sooner or easier than they first thought that was possible, but we don't know the details of that. But to me, if you're dealing with the Deshaun contract and you're signing Myles Garrett to this insane amount of money, the way that you mitigate that while also trying to win football games is you draft a quarterback. And you draft one this year and try to just win with that over the next 4 to 5 years and have that rookie contract flexibility. So until there are other moves made or truths or details about what's going on with the Deshaun Watson situation, to me, the Myles Garrett contract signals that they are going to draft a quarterback. And I think that Cam Ward's floor is now number 2. He either goes number 1 to the Titans or the Giants, maybe trading up to number 1, or he goes number 2 to the Cleveland Browns. I don't think he gets further than that. What do you think?
I still think there might be, and it would still imply that Cam Ward's floor is likely at number 2, but I still think there might be a chance that the Browns trade down and out of that second spot. But it feels like if they do stay there, it's going to be Cam Ward or it's going to be Travis Hunter. I don't think they would double up at edge rusher now and have Myles Garrett and Abdul Carter. I don't think. Maybe they could and just go all out and say, beat our defensive line the same way teams have to beat the Steelers, but that doesn't help your problems on offense. We haven't really heard them connected to any veteran quarterbacks other than maybe Kirk Cousins. It sounds like he's available, and even then, obviously, that's a short-term, probably one-year fix. I'm in between on this because, yes, obviously they need a franchise quarterback. They have to transition from the Deshaun Watson contract and all of that. But regardless of who their quarterback is, they're not going to compete in 2025. They just don't have the team for it. Their offensive line's getting older. They right now have nothing at running back. They have one respectable receiver in Jerry Jeudy, and they need work in the secondary. I mean, behind obviously Myles Garrett's great, and he immediately gives you a top 10 to 12 defensive line by himself, but the secondary was a real problem this past year too. So there's a lot to fix on this team. Obviously, from a roster perspective, it's great to get to keep Garrett. I mean, the guy's got the highest pass rush grade of any edge defender in PFF history. That helps. He's not just a great player. He's an all-time great player, right? So getting to keep him is obviously a boon to the defense, but they still need to build the back end of it. And I think the biggest mystery right now in the NFL is what the top three teams in the draft, Tennessee, Cleveland, and the Giants, what they think of this quarterback class, and especially the top two, Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. I mean, do they like Cam Ward but not Shedeur? Do they like them both? Do they like neither of them? What is the deal here? Because we've heard the Giants especially connected with veteran quarterbacks, and obviously they're picking third. We've heard the Browns connected with Cam Ward. Brian Callahan's been kind of coy about this quarterback class and talking about what he likes in a quarterback without saying anybody's name or mentioning anybody. So it's tough. But I think you're right. I think at this point we feel like the Browns, there's three options. It's Cam Ward, it's Travis Hunter, or they're going to trade out of that pick and let somebody else take Cam or Shedeur, right? Does that sound about right, or did I miss anything there?
Run that back for me. What were all the options?
Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, trade down.
Yeah, I can't. I don't really see a world where they're doing something outside of those three. You're either drafting a quarterback, you're either drafting the special talent in Travis Hunter, or you're trading back. I don't think that Shedeur's on the table for them at number two. I really don't. It's just coming off of the conversations that I had at the Senior Bowl, conversations that I had at the Super Bowl, conversations that I had at the Combine. I just don't think the league views Shedeur like that. I really don't. I think it's a lot of connections of like, oh, this team needs a quarterback, so let's give them one of the quarterbacks that's in this class. I don't hear a lot of people talk with conviction with Shedeur going that high. So that's sort of the way I feel about the Cleveland Browns as well. There's another edge rusher, Khalil Mack. He stays home. He stays in Los Angeles. He commits to the Chargers, which is a big deal because he's still playing at a very high level. We talked about what a high level Myles Garrett was playing at. Khalil Mack, not quite that high, but still an elite PFF grade this past year, the 7th elite PFF overall grade in the season of his career. I mean, he is still great, and he's a major reason why the Chargers were able to play as well as they did on the defensive line. He signs for 1 year, $18 million, which Dalton, our projections had him at 2 years, $45 million, and $40 million total guaranteed. So not only the Chargers probably would have liked to get him for an extra year, they probably would have liked to sign him for a 2-year deal just to give him that flexibility. But to get him for less on a per year basis and less in guarantees than we had him projected at, despite him playing really, really well and despite the Chargers needing him, to me, that showcases the sign of this is a really good organization. This is an organization that people want to play for. And I think that you see some other major overpays around the league, whether it was trades or not. You see these teams have to pay a lot to get these guys to either come or stay with their organization. You look at this move with the Chargers, and you see that Stephen Haglund, he a good friend who covers the Chargers, he reported that there were at least 3 other teams interested in Khalil Mack's services. One of the teams even offered him a 3-year deal, which with Mack being 34 years old, that's a big deal. But he believes in Jim Harbaugh's vision. I think that just speaks volumes to what they are building over there with Los Angeles. I mean, it goes towards the Buccaneers as well, bringing back Ben Bredeson, bringing back Chris Godwin, being able to bring back Chris Godwin, who there were reports that Chris Godwin turned down $20 million extra, now not per year, but extra in total for deals that could have been out there around the NFL, but he decided to stay in Tampa because he loves it in Tampa. Those are just signs of when you have the right organization, sometimes these guys do sign for a little bit less money. I tweeted out yesterday because I think it's mostly true, but money is king. Was, is, will always be. Money talks. It's the most important thing for a lot of these players. And it makes sense when you're talking about generational money for you, your family, your kids, their kids, their kids' kids, everything. Like when you're talking about this much money, that's what you're talking about here. So I understand there's a lot of responsibility involved, but when you are within the right organization, sometimes you can get guys to come back for a little bit less when you have the right setup. And I think the Chargers are building a special one, and I think that is the big takeaway from them re-signing Khalil Mack, in my opinion.
Yeah, again, the goal of the first calendar year of Jim Harbaugh's tenure in L.A. was to change the culture of the L.A. Chargers, right? And I think especially with something like this, he's done that for sure. And I think for Khalil Mack, you mentioned the Bucs, and another guy I think to bring up there is Levante David, who's kind of been on this annual,
Sure.
We've been on this annual Levante David watch is when is he going to sign that one-year deal that he signs every year? He did it again this year. And maybe Khalil Mack does want to do that and just take it 1 year at a time instead of making a 2 and 3 year commitment to somewhere that he may or may not want to be. Or if, because again, he's going to be 30, he just turned 34 years old. You're talking about a guy who obviously still playing great. And it's amazing to me. I was just looking at it. He's got a 90-plus PFF grade in 7 of his 11 seasons, including the last 2, which is just crazy. He's one of the all-time greats, just like Myles Garrett was that we're talking about earlier. But no, I think it speaks to how good he's still playing, how much of a fit he's been with the Chargers. And then obviously they have to fill out the rest of their defensive line, but I think his belief in them that they're going to be a winning organization, right? They just need to add a few more pieces alongside him on the defensive line, especially on the inside where they got some free agents, adding more weapons around Ladd McConkey in the receiving game, right? Maybe adding it running back too. So I really think the Chargers, they're very much on this precipice, especially with this much money to spend in free agency. I think they have a top 5 amount of cap space even after this. They've got a real chance to make a push, especially with as vulnerable as the Chiefs look, as vulnerable as, say, the Cincinnati Bengals look. We know the Ravens have had a hard time finishing things in the playoffs. I think the Chargers, if they build this right, have as good a chance to make the AFC title game or even the Super Bowl as any next year if they nail this offseason.
All right, so another deal that I want to talk about. Actually, you know what, Eli? There's some news on Javon Holland, and I know he hasn't signed anywhere yet, but there's a report on the teams that he is considering. Can you tell the good people which teams are involved in Javon Holland's services?
Of course. Per Jeremy Fowler, we have Holland is drawing interest from the Colts, the Titans, the Commanders, and the Panthers. So,
all right,
could be big for the Panthers, but they don't have Milton Williams yet either.
Boy, that would be tough to strike out on Javon Holland and Milton Williams in a day where you were talking about signing both of those guys as major defensive impacted pieces. So those 4 teams, we got the Titans, the Colts, the Commanders, and the Panthers there. Which landing spot do you like the best for Javon Holland, Dalton?
I would say I actually think it's the Colts.
I think it's the Colts too. I'd love him in Anarumo's defense.
I think him with Anarumo, he's going to see a lot of Jesse Bates in him. I mean, I think that's where we're at with Javon Holland, is he's on that level of safety. And obviously Anarumo, seeing in Cincinnati the last couple of years without Bates, how much that really hurt him to have a team that was among the lowest graded safeties in football. I think the Colts, I think he'd fit great with Anarumo. Obviously the Panthers need pieces. The Commanders would be a lot of fun. They need pieces all over their defense. They signed Javon Kinlaw earlier for $15 million a year. I'm not a huge fan of that. I thought they could have done better with all the cap space they have than that. But Holland would fit with any of the. There's one team I'm surprised we're not hearing about with Javon Holland. That to me, that's actually the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I know they made a move for.
I agree.
They made a move for Jordan Lewis earlier, but they actually had the lowest graded group of safeties in the league this year. I'm surprised they're not one here. But I think the Colts with Lou Anarumo, maybe they add a corner in the draft. Maybe it frees you up to go with an offensive player. Maybe a tight end in the draft if one is available at 14. But I think the Colts and Anarumo, I think you would see a lot of Jesse Bates there and could see a use for him for sure.
I like the Colts the most, I think, out of those teams. I'm intrigued by the Panthers because I think that they would run a lot of their back-end coverage structure around him, and so Evero would have the chance to really have a safety that they can build upon there back there. I think that him and J.C. Horn would be big-time emphases of the coverage schemes that they would run there for the Panthers. So I think that would be fun, but I do like him a lot in sort of that Jesse Bates role for Lou Anarumo. So I like that spot there for him. The Jags are interesting. I would think that they would have been in the conversations for Holland. Maybe they just don't think that highly of him, or maybe going back to the Jerry and Jones conversation, maybe they think Jerry and Jones is more of a safety. Could be moving him to safety instead of outside corner with the signing of Jordan Lewis. So maybe that would be the case there. I do want to go back to the Commanders signing Javon Kinlaw for a massive deal. I don't want to say massive, I guess. But $15 million a deal is $15 million a year on a 3-year deal is pretty dang big for Kinlaw, and how disappointing he was this past year for the New York Jets, where he had all the opportunity to really be able to stand out. He's a talented player, a former first-round pick, but he just hasn't really lived up to that. And to me, I wonder if the Commanders wanting to get Kinlaw was a little bit of that Adam Peters connection, right, coming over from San Francisco where he was drafted, but also the fact that this was a destination spot for Myles Garrett with the trade, Khalil Mack when he was going to get hit, if he was going to hit free agency, the Commanders were a team that I think was looking at. And I wonder if they've been prepared, if they budgeted so much money for the defensive line, and now two of the biggest fish there. And you can throw Hassan Reddick in there, who also signed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so he's kind of off the market, right? So is this just an overpay because they thought they were getting a different defensive lineman, and now they're just willing to spend money to get anybody to sort of change it around here? Or do you genuinely think that they believe that Kinlaw is worth this money himself?
I think it's in between. I mean, me personally, with a team that I think came in here with the second or third most effective cap space in the league, if you're going to get up in this territory, in the $15 or even $20 million territory for a defensive tackle, why not just go big fish and try to go get in the Milton Williams sweepstakes, right? The guy who just led the league in pass rush grade, right? And you've got Milton Williams and you have Johnny Newton, who you drafted last year, right? Why not get up in that range and do that? Because look,
also why not just keep John Allen?
Or just keep Jonathan Allen. I mean, look, Javon Kinlaw, this is what the second part you mentioned is really the part, and there's so many of these signings that we can dig in and get into. What are the connections? Who knows who? Which coach knows this guy in front office? And that's what this is. This is Adam Peters, because he was obviously in San Francisco's front office. Adam Peters obviously going, we drafted this guy. I know how talented he is. It's why we scouted him. It's why we took him in the first round with the 49ers. And taking that gamble that talent is still in there that he thought was there when he drafted him. The problem is that was way back in 2020 it was. And Javon Kinlaw's career high PFF grade for a season is 53.8, his career high. I mean, there's not really a whole lot to me on the production side that justifies guaranteeing him $30 million over the next 3 years and having that total contract at $45 million. So I'm not a big fan of this move. Look, and again, even last year with the Jets, he signed with the Jets in connection with Robert Saleh, who was there when they drafted him in the defense coordinator and all that. So look, connections mean a lot when it comes to this process, and it's one of the things we have to take into account. It's just me. If I'm the Commanders and I'm getting up in this range, go ahead and get Milton Williams. Go get Josh Sweat. Go see if there's some other trade to make for a legitimate defensive lineman. I'm not, for as great as, obviously the Commanders have rebuilt this thing in a year with Jaden Daniels and everything around it. This is a move that really puzzles me for the commitment to it, and I don't see that he played very much better at all with the Jets this past season.
Yeah, Justin's in the chat saying John Allen was the easiest to cut out of the guys in the group. He's smaller and he's older. That's why you move on from him. But I also think that John Allen's a better football player than Javon Kinlaw. So just because he's a little bit older, just because he's easier to move on from, just because you have a new name doesn't necessarily make it better. Now, Javon Kinlaw, I think, has more athletic potential at this point in time of their athletic careers, but he hasn't lived up to that athletic potential. And so I think that you're paying for something that you haven't necessarily seen from him. It's a bit of a risk, but I feel like, all signings could be. Somebody in the chat was asking, what do you think Milton Williams is going to get? Well, if you guys go over to our free agency ranking tool, so you can just Google PFF free agency rankings, it'll be the first thing. You can go right there. You could sort by interior defenders, and Milton Williams, we have projected for him to get 3 years, $21 million per year average. So that would be $63 million total and $40 million guaranteed. So that's around the ballpark of what we have when it comes to a value of Milton Williams. You guys can see all of the other numbers that we have over there for all of the other free agents in our free agent ranking. If you go over to PFF's free agent tools, again, could be just as easy as, you can go to the website, you go to pff.com and sort of navigate it yourself if you want to. You can find it through the tabs. But if you just want to Google PFF free agency rankings, boom, it'll be the first thing that you see there. So you guys can go check all that stuff out there. Anybody else that we didn't hit? Paulson Adebo going to the Giants really needed him, right? I mean, that cornerback room was not what it needed to be. Deontay Banks took a big step back last year. Loved Drew Phillips and him, what he was able to do in his rookie season there, but you needed more. I like Paulson Adebo. I think it's a loss for the New Orleans Saints. 3 years, $30 million. So, him coming off the year that he has had with getting hurt for the Saints, I think they're getting him at a good value. And I think that Paulson Adebo is a really good football player. What do you think?
No, I agree. I think you're talking about a team. I'm curious where the defensive scheme goes because I think they run a little bit too much man coverage, although he's got experience with that in New Orleans under Dennis Allen. So I do think it's at least an infusion of talent. And I think a warning sign to any of the young kids there, listen, we went out and we paid Paulson Adebo starter money. You're going to have to compete for these jobs. That includes their former first-round pick, Deontay Banks. So it's somewhere they had to get better in the secondary. Obviously I think safety is still a position of need too, but it's a good move for the Giants to get at least a league average starter in there in Adebo and a guy who's familiar with a lot of man-to-man coverage.
Ooh. Got a little bit of breaking news here on one of those teams that we just talked about, on one of those subjects that we just talked about. Eli, do you have it up? If you don't, I can read it. I've got it up here for you.
Are we talking about Trayvon Moehrig expected to sign?
We are talking about
3
Trayvon
years,
Moehrig.
$51 million to the Panthers.
3 years, $51 million to the Carolina Panthers, so not in the Javon Holland market anymore, but I do really like that get for them. I think that Trayvon Moehrig is a very solid player, so he gets 3 years, $51 million. We had him projected at getting 4 years, $72 million total. So quick math, is that about the same?
Roughly. So he's getting 17. That projects 18. Roughly the same with one less year.
So our projections were pretty close to that. And I like Moehrig, man. I think he is a solid safety. And the thing that I like about him the most, Dalton, is he can legitimately play single high for you if you want him to, right? It's not like he's not going to be the best single high safety in the NFL, but at least he understands spacing and he's got good enough range and he can play on the back end where when you want to go cover 3, when you want to go cover 1, if you want to play more man coverage, if you want to play more aggressive up front, he at least has that center fielder mentality for you. So I really do like this signing for the Panthers because I don't think they had this type of a player on their roster.
No, they didn't. And I think you make that point. There's two things that Moehrig is. He's versatile and he's durable, right? And obviously this Panthers team dealt with a boatload of injuries this past season. And that's really, you mentioned it, that's where Ejiro Evero, that's where he wants to get to. 4th highest rate of cover 3 in the NFL last season, the Panthers defense. I would expect him to play that free safety role for them. Obviously he can do a lot of different things in the box as well. And maybe they continue to add safety depth, I think, in the draft. But this takes them out of the Javon Holland race. When you're paying another guy $17 million like this, that's a big story here. So take Carolina out of that. So you still have the Colts, you still have the Commanders. We're going to talk about Tennessee is one you mentioned, but I think the Panthers getting Moehrig here right after paying J.C. Horn. They're probably going to cool it in the secondary when it comes to free agency. I think they're still going to try to add some value plays in the front 7 or maybe even offensively if they can find any weapons. But I'm with you. I think this is a really good signing. Again, something when you're a defense this bad, when you're the lowest graded defense in football, you need stability, and that's what Moehrig's going to give them.
We got people in the chat talking to us as if deals are done. We've got certain players, and maybe this will be the case. Maybe within the next couple of minutes we'll confirm it. But I just think you guys in the chat, I don't know if you're saying you want this player to go to this team or you actually reporting that this player is going to this team. It's tougher when I don't have Twitter up because Twitter is down again.
They have their sources, so, Trevor.
We do currently, apparently, according to Rap, Milton Williams to the Patriots.
Oh.
Per Rap.
Oh.
Dude. Pat's loading up on defense. I did not think so much of their salary cap was going to go to defense. They have signed Carlton Davis, they have signed Robert Spillane, they have signed Milton Williams, and they have signed Harold Landry over the last couple of days. Holy cow.
Okay then. That's a lot. I mean, that's Mike Vrabel, really. I mean, that's
26 mil per year for Milton Williams?
26? Is that what you just said?
That's what somebody in the chat
26
said.
million is what it's looking like online.
Wow. What it's looking like online seems very ambiguous, but I have to trust it.
Well, apparently it's from Blue Sky, so that's where I'm finding information.
we got to do what we got to do. These are tough times.
It's online, Trev. What can I say?
I should do a mock draft right now and just every pick for the Patriots.
Throw it on Blue Sky.
Every offensive. Oh, man.
Holy cow.
26 a year that's insane. Okay, maybe I was off on the Commanders going 26 a year. That's a lot. I mean, their entire draft's going to be on offense, isn't it? The whole thing.
I'm kind of surprised that we're seeing this much money going into interior defensive linemen, given how good this interior defensive line class is.
Well, copycat league. The Eagles had the highest graded the highest graded group of defensive tackles in the league and just won the Super Bowl. Now everyone's going to go and try to do the same thing, get an interior pass rush going.
It is funny, like the totality of the show. I'm going to go back and listen to this show, not only because I'm a narcissist, but also because it will be funny to listen to us talk about the Panthers and be like, oh, Milton Williams to the Panthers, and we talk about the fit and how great it is next to Derek Brown, and then we talked about, Milton Williams and then Javon Holland. Neither of those things happened. Like within 30 minutes after us first bringing that up.
It's been a tough half hour for Carolina Panthers. I mean, look, Trayvon Merrick's a good player.
Yep.
But obviously, if they're going to get rumored with Holland and Milton Williams, who may be the two best players at each of their positions, I mean, that is tough. I mean, and obviously, it was going to take more than those two players to fix it anyway. But I'm thinking about now, like you just mentioned, what this New England defense looks like. I think they probably could still use some edge help, but you're talking about there's just a lot of good players sitting here. Christian Barmore, right, assuming he's healthy. Now you've got Milton Williams next to him, Keon White, Robert Spillane, Carlton Davis, Christian Gonzalez.
Harold Landry, man.
Harold Landry, Marcus Jones in the slot. I mean, wow. That's not a bad defense by any means. I mean, again, I would expect now they're going to spend their entire draft on offense. And this is tough. I mean, you need left tackle. You need running backs like all hell. And you need one or two receivers, we think. I mean, but you're not that far from all of a sudden going with this defense especially, okay, this is at least a functional football team, and it's been a year or two since we've seen that from the Patriots.
I'm gonna put our production team on the spot right here. Can we pull up the mock draft simulator? Can we? Is this something that we might be able to do mid-show and be able to share the screen and just be able to do this? If it's not, tell me because I'm throwing this on you guys. But what Dalton is talking about, I would love to within 5 minutes, very quickly, do a Patriots 3-round mock draft with those 4 picks.
And all, do you want, or we could go, do we go 7 and go on? Is it an all offense draft? Is this what we're doing? Are they just not?
I just want to do the first 3 rounds, 1 through 3.
We're pulling it up. Give us a sec.
Can you pull it up?
Yeah, we're pulling it up right now.
Okay, cool. Okay, because I would love to do this. And like in the shows that we do this week, I would love to maybe be able to do that when we see like some crazy stuff happens for teams, because I think that would be a lot of fun. And I think the chat would get a kick out of that too. Oh, they mentioned, we forgot to say, the Pats also signed Morgan Moses, so obviously that goes into it.
Morgan Moses, yeah. I mean,
as well.
You're really talking about, they're big spots, but left tackle, receiver, running back. Those are really the 3 now obvious things. Is this defense, I don't know how much more you could talk about adding to that defense and going, hey, we really need to do this. But this is Mike Vrabel making a statement, man. That's exactly what it is you know what? Everyone else is going offense heavy, and it's a better market in the look. You could look at the original list of free agents and go, oh yeah, it's better on defense. Absolutely, that's what New England's taking advantage of.
What happened? I wonder what happened. Okay, so we're controlling the Patriots here. All right, so now we got the PFF mock draft simulator up. By the way, for anybody out there that loves this idea that's maybe not a Patriots fan, we will be updating things and draft picks and all of that as free agency goes on this week. Go over to pff.com/mock, run some mock drafts for yourself with these new players on your favorite team and see what possibilities are. This is when mock drafts get really fun, when free agency is going on and afterwards. So, all right, let's start the draft. Let's see who we got at number 4. We're probably just going all offense here. Membu goes 3 to the Giants. That's an absolute backbreaker. Ashton Genty goes 2 to the Cleveland Browns.
This is certainly a simulation. We're going to have to stress the part where this is absolutely a simulation. But look, me personally,
we going Tet?
I think it's a tough call between Tet and Hunter because
no, Hunter's there.
But okay, so that would have to assume then, again, we talked about before about them signing Carlton Davis. That would assume that New England likes Hunter, the receiver, as that's what he is, right? And even more so than Tet. And the one thing I want to throw out there, and I think Max Chadwick's done a really good job of emphasizing this, that Mike Vrabel talked about getting a guy who can reel in off-target throws. And you think about a guy that's 6'5" like Tedero McMillan, and you go, maybe that's it. And trying to get downfield with a vertical passer like Drake May. I think in this scenario, I think there would be a real debate about Travis Hunter, the receiver, versus Tedero McMillan, the receiver.
Let's just go Hunter because he's on the board, and I think if he makes it to 4 at all whatsoever, they're going to pick Travis Hunter. But if you think that that's unrealistic, as because a couple of the picks up top, like I understand, like Cam Ward probably going to go, but Abdul Carter's probably not going to be there, and Travis Hunter's probably not going to be there. So if you don't think that it's realistic that Travis Hunter gets to 4, just imagine we're taking Tetro McMillan. So we're taking a wide receiver here at 4 no matter what.
I think Hunter could get to 4 if the Giants feel backed into a corner to take a quarterback. I think he absolutely could.
So let's pick him there. Let's go Travis Hunter here at number 4, and let's see what we got at in the second round. Hopefully he's not too wonky on us.
If Josh Connerly's sitting there and you get a left tackle also.
You're picking him because we're picking at 38.
If Connerly's sitting there, I got to think you can plug and play him in. I think he's a plug and play starter that could go in the 20s instead of here. But I would sit there. I would run the card in. If I already have Hunter at my disposal, I'm running the card in for Connerly here.
Yeah, let's do Connerly. I don't want to spend too much time on this mock. Let's go to Connerly because I do want to talk about the other free agents because we got stuff going on. Io Mainer's here.
Io Mainer is he there?
Oh, no. Sorry. Elijah Arroyo is what I meant.
Arroyo's there. Even running back, if you Dylan Sampson, they need a running back too.
They do, and he's sort of perfect for them.
Or do you go there, or do you wait for 77 to take a different back, see whoever's out there?
I think Dylan Sampson's really good, man. I do.
I could reason with either. You're talking about weapons. Now, they still have Hunter Henry, and they just re-signed Austin Hooper. I know it doesn't really prohibit you from taking a guy like Arroyo, but I think my eyes go to Dylan Sampson right there. I'm with you.
All right, let's take Dylan Sampson. Let's do Sampson. Let's go Dylan Sampson, the running back from Tennessee, the speedster.
Ozzy's not a bad call because I know you signed Morgan Moses for 3 years, but it's really only going to be 1 or 2.
I guess they signed him for 3 years.
It's only going to be 1 or 2, though. I mean, you know how these things go.
But what about Ursary? Because you might be able to play him. You think you can play him at guard?
I don't think so. I think Ursary's a tackle.
All right, keep
let's scroll down a little.
I don't hate Mason Taylor here. Don't hate Mason Taylor.
Oh, do you take a talent play? Is this where you take a talent play on a Kevin Winston?
Oh, no. I guess you could go Kevin Winston.
I think Kevin Winston here would be a good talent play because we haven't seen them attack safety. Not that they're terrible at safety, but it's some veteran guys. Kevin Winston's a guy I actually think, he doesn't play to the ball as much as, say, like somebody like Kevin Byard used to, but is there something in there that Mike Vrabel could see in that? I think Kevin Winston might be a talent play there at safety as long as he's healthy.
All right, let's do it. Let's go Kevin Winston Jr. Let's go. Let's go. Dan Sauter said Ozzy for low movie cost. Shout out to NFLSC. Let's go, baby. Okay. All right. So there's the quick New England Patriots draft with them just absolutely stacking defense here in free agency. We go Travis Hunter or Tetro McMillan if you think that's more realistic. Josh Connerly Jr. then Dylan Sampson with Kevin Winston Jr. the safety at number 77.
Hey, to put a 5-minute mock together and get an A-, that's pretty good. I could live with that.
Not bad. Okay. All right. There you go. All right, I just wanted to see what it looked like, and I wanted to flex the mock draft simulator so you guys could know that you could go do that yourself over at pff.com/mock. Getting back to free agency, did we get any signings while we were gone?
I got Puna Ford.
Yeah, Eli, if you want to take that one, go ahead.
3 years, $30 million, 17 guaranteed.
Let's go.
Love that.
Love that.
That Rams defensive line is insane.
That's what you always say on SC, Trev. Low moving cost. Staying in LA.
Staying in LA, dude. Low moving cost. He can stay in the same damn townhouse that he lives in now.
Are you kidding?
I don't know if he lives in a townhouse. It looks like a townhouse.
Are you kidding me with this defensive line right now? This Rams D line?
Read it off to me.
Crazy. Think about it. You add Puna Ford to Jared Verse to Braden Fisk to Kobe Turner to everything they have going on their D line, and you just added a guy who was a top 5 run stopper last year. I mean, this is a move specifically meant to beat the Philadelphia Eagles, right? That's what this is. Saquon ran all over us twice. We have to beat the Eagles. This is the guy we're going to do it with. This Rams defensive line is just insane. It's an insane amount of talent.
I'm a big fan of that move.
Absolutely.
I really am. Well, can we talk about linebackers a little bit? I know this happened not too long ago, but just speaking of how free agency is sort of giving us some signals on the NFL draft. We had a linebacker class in free agency that included guys like Levante David and Bobby Wagner and Robert Spillane and Zach Bond, Jamian Sherwood, Nick Bolton, Ernest Jones. All of them, other than Robert Spillane, stayed with their teams. They prioritized bringing all of those linebackers back. And to me, that speaks volume about where we are with the linebacker class in the 2025 NFL draft. I think a lot of those guys are just getting drafted way later than we think. Like even guys like Demetrius Knight, who I really like, Carson Schweschinger. Jahad Campbell, I think, is immune to that. Jahad Campbell will be a top 20 pick. But outside of that, I think you'll be able to get linebackers late. I think a lot of these linebackers are going to go day 3, and that's why you see the money being given out to these guys who were pending free agents on these teams. Nobody wanted to lose these linebackers. So that was my immediate takeaway with a lot of those guys getting re-signed by their own teams.
And we have Rappaport saying the Seahawks just signed Sam Darnold.
There it is.
Gets 3-year deal worth nearly $100 million.
So we got the Baker deal.
Yep, that sounds right. That sounds about right.
How do you like it? I don't. But look, if Geno, like the person in the chat was saying earlier, if Geno Smith said that he was not going to negotiate with the Seahawks, perhaps your hands were tied. There was nothing you could do about it.
Yeah.
But if Geno wasn't entering negotiations because of how you were approaching it, and this could have been fixable, then all of a sudden I don't really like this one in, one out. Because Geno Smith made up for what was a terrible interior offensive line last season. And right now they have done nothing to improve that interior offensive line. And if Sam Darnold's playing behind that interior, it's just I don't think it's going to be very good this upcoming season. But they still have a lot of time to invest in that interior offensive line, whether it be through free agency, whether that be through the NFL draft. So there is still a lot of team building yet to come. In a vacuum, I don't like the Geno Smith for Sam Darnold trade out, but Sam going to the Seahawks. What do you think here?
Okay, yeah, in a vacuum, obviously, I think it's a slight downgrade. And we have to remember, despite the way things ended, Darnold played really well this past season, right? And now it was a better situation in Minnesota. You have Justin Jefferson. Certainly, I'm sure Darnold would have liked this signing more himself if he still had DK Metcalf, but that's a whole nother story. The big thing to remember here is two things. One, if Geno was looking for the $47 to $50 million range, and they pivoted and got Darnold for, I think what's being reported at roughly $37 a year. I think the contract maxes out around $110 million. Then obviously they're saving something on that, and if they allocate it to the rest of the team the right way, it can work for them. They had to get this out of the way, though, so if they want to sign, say, one of the guards in free agency, a Tevin Jenkins or an Aaron Banks, I think about, or a Will Fry, somebody like that, now they have a little bit money more to do that, and receiver, I think, becomes a big focus in the draft. We have to remember, too, with Darnold, there's a connection from that 2023 season with the 49ers with their offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak. I believe he was the passing game coordinator for the 49ers that season. He's at least somewhat familiar with Darnold, as pretty much everyone in the Shanahan tree is now. So I think Clint Kubiak might have actually been the biggest factor in getting Darnold here, in Darnold's comfort in that system. It's going to be a very similar system that he ran under Clint Kubiak. So when you think about his options, okay, the two big ones that had been coming out were the Seattle Seahawks, right, or the Pittsburgh Steelers, ironically, where they sent DK Metcalf. And I think he probably felt like his familiarity with Kubiak, his ability to get a similar deal from both, and the comfort in that offense played a factor in it. Now, I really think, especially the re-signed Ernest Jones in free agency, right, their two big focuses now have to be interior offensive line, which I think can be addressed in free agency, especially the right guard spot, or if they want to do both guard spots and get rid of Lake and Tomlinson, plus finding anything on the outside at receiver, right? And you're talking about a team, they just got the 52nd pick back from Pittsburgh. That's a premium pick to get a receiver. There's a lot of depth in this receiver class. Again, 18, there have been some mock drafts where a Teteroa McMillan's been falling that far, which I'm not a huge fan of, but that would be a dream scenario for Seattle if they ever got a guy like that, a direct kind of ex-receiver replacement for Metcalf to go along with Smith and Jigba in the slot. So there are scenarios where this can work. Is it an upgrade from Geno Smith? No, but this happened because they hired Clint Kubiak and the connection with Sam Darnold and the potential for comfort in the offense despite some greater obstacles around him than he had in Minnesota.
And I think that that's a really good call, and that's really good context. And I'll pump the brakes on sort of my skepticism that I talked about at the top, because I think I'm being too much of a Geno defender when I look at the Sam Darnold move and think as negatively or skeptically as I do about it. I think Sam Darnold played really well last year, but you do look at a team that, okay, you're going from an offense that had legit receiving weapons basically everywhere. You had Justin Jefferson, you had Jordan Addison, you had Jalen Naylor, you had TJ Hawkinson, you had Aaron Jones, you had a really good offensive line, you had a really great play caller. Now you're going over to Seattle, in which you have familiarity with a play caller who I like in Clint Kubiak, I really do. You just moved on from DK Metcalf. You moved on from Tyler Lockett. You basically just have Jackson Smith and Jigba. You've got Noah Fant, but that's not a TJ Hawkinson type. You have decent options out of the backfield with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, so I like those guys. But you have a much worse interior offensive line and much worse just, I think, offensive line chemistry in general. So the work is still yet to be done, in my opinion, for the Seahawks. And maybe you think it's sort of a 2-year thing to get really exactly where you need to go. I'm totally okay with that. But it's just I'm just shocked how we got here with the Seahawks, given what Geno Smith was to that team. And maybe it is simply a money in, money out. Hey, we're getting Sam Darnold for $10 million a year less than we would have had to pay Geno Smith. And maybe that's just all it is. And that's sort of a bottom line there.
Well, and real quick, go ahead. Real quick there to keep in mind, not only is it money in, money out, but there is an age in, age out thing too. When you talk about Geno Smith, for as good as he's been, is going to be 35 in October. Sam Darnold will be 28 in June. So a lot of GMs, I'm sure that you talk to, if you go, hey, we got a quarterback that's over 20% less expensive and 7 years younger, maybe obviously production for production, not necessarily a win, but we also still have to look at Darnold's production in totality last season, knowing what he can do and the fact that he's still only going to be 28 years old.
Yeah, look, I will gladly be wrong here if Sam Darnold plays as well as he did last year for a new team. I love when the league is ripe with great quarterback play all around. But that was 1 year with Darnold as opposed to a much bigger sample size of him struggling. So that is my skepticism with that. It was in a very, very quarterback-friendly offensive system, and we even saw how it sort of kind of crumbled down the stretch in those last 2 games. So I think that it is well within the realm of possibility that he could succeed. I do really like the connection with him and Clint Kubiak. I'm just a little bit more skeptical about this one. So we'll keep going here on the show as we've got some free agents news that is breaking, all that kinds of stuff. But we'll sort of wrap it up because we do have a show tomorrow, guys. Like, we will be back tomorrow. This isn't the only free agency show that we're doing, so we'll be back tomorrow. But before we end today, Dalton, I had written down, if we got to this segment in the show, because I knew that we'd be talking about a lot of stuff live, some bold predictions about where players landed. And I just did quarterbacks, and I'm curious what you think about these. Now, I had Darnold to the Seahawks. That was my call for Sam Darnold. I said Seattle Seahawks just because of everything that I had heard. Justin Fields, I have the New York Jets. Russell Wilson, I have him going back to the Steelers because if you trade all this money for DK Metcalf, that's sort of the offense that you're still building, especially if George Pickens is still on the team. So I thought about the best quarterback to operate that type of an offense, and I said Russell Wilson going back to the Steelers. Daniel Jones, I said Indianapolis Colts. Jameis Winston, I said the Las Vegas Raiders. Aaron Rodgers, I said the Tennessee Titans. And Kirk Cousins, I actually still have him on the Atlanta Falcons. I don't really know what happens with Kirk Cousins. I don't think it's a guarantee that the Falcons just cut him. Apparently, I can't remember who reported this. There was a conversation between Kirk Cousins and Arthur Blank, and Kirk Cousins expressed, hey, I would like to go somewhere where I can start. And from the report that I saw, the Falcons were like, hey, buddy, we're going to do whatever we think is best for this team. And if keeping you as the backup is what we think is best for this team, that is what we are going to do. We are paying you a lot of money to do it, and so we don't feel bad about it. And if we could justify that, we're not going to move you. Those were the destinations that I had. Let me know what you think of Darnold to the Seahawks, Fields to the Jets, Wilson to the Steelers, Daniel Jones to the Colts, Winston to the Raiders, Rodgers to the Titans, and then Cousins staying put with the Falcons. What do you think?
If there was one Okay, I'm going to start this with a question because there's one here. All those make some semblance of sense, obviously. There's one I think I disagree with, and that's Aaron Rodgers to Tennessee. I don't know that we've heard a whole lot of noise about that. The most that we've heard is about, I think, mainly the Giants and the Steelers. And I'm curious, what do you have here? Is this just the assumption that the Giants are going to wait it out? Because it sounds like they're very interested in this veteran market, right? The Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilsons of the world. Where do the Giants end up for you in this scenario?
Yeah, I guess I don't really know what the Giants are doing at this point because I think that they've tried to take some big swings for veteran quarterbacks and they've missed on all of them. So I don't think that probably takes them out of the veteran quarterback market at all whatsoever. But when I think of the Giants, I just think about them drafting a quarterback. I feel like they sort of took their swings at veterans that they would want to get, whether that be with Sam Darnold or Matthew Stafford or potentially in the Geno Smith conversation, and it just has not manifested at all whatsoever. So I don't even know if one of these veteran quarterbacks even still sways them from being aggressive to even like trade up to number one to go get Cam Ward now, in my opinion. So the Giants are a tough one for me to figure out because I think they're really desperate to go get a quarterback, and I don't think quarterbacks are very interested in going to New York.
No, I get that part. It sounds like the two for them that they're interested in at least are Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. And again, the Steelers situation is kind of holding this up. Now, we'll see what happens in the next few hours because Sam Darnold going to Seattle means the Steelers have to pivot away from him and look at these veterans. And I still wonder how much with Darnold off the table are they going to push also for Justin Fields, because it sounds like they prefer Fields over Russell Wilson, but not as much as Justin Fields would want them to. So I think we do have a couple of holdups, and the Steelers really are the biggest one. I think the guys behind the glass are saying we have one more that they want to.
All right, what do we got?
That they want to break to us. I'm trying to get this, of course.
Yeah. So you guys are talking about quarterbacks. We got a cornerback going to the Steelers. Darius Slay. Jordan Schultz reports Darius Slay is going to the Steelers.
Wow.
Okay. That's only odd because he had said Philly or Detroit or retirement. Didn't he say that himself maybe in the last few weeks?
I didn't hear that from him.
I thought he was saying that he wanted to play either stay in Philly or go back to Detroit or retire. This seems like I don't want to say out of nowhere because maybe there's somewhere I missed the tea leaves, but that's a bit surprising. But tell you what, aside from quarterback, this is their next biggest need. Right?
I was going to say, I love this for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, this is a fantastic move. You put Slay across from Joey Porter, and you have Beanie Bishop in the slot. All of a sudden, that's a lot better. And Slay is still good, even as a veteran player, who maybe only has a year or two left. But no, they had a big time need at corner, and to get a player of this caliber, I think is a really solid move for them. Now you just look at the quarterback position and go, what are they doing?
Yeah, I love this. I think, again, with them, even though I said that you paid a lot of money to go get DK Metcalf, and I didn't necessarily agree with how they went about that, you've now attacked your two biggest needs outside of quarterback, right? Corner and wide receiver were the two biggest needs. And so now you get to sit here at number 21. You can let the draft fall to you however you may. And that's a big part of what free agency is, mitigating a lot of your weaknesses. And when you could do it with top-tier talent like DK Metcalf and Darius Slay, perhaps the Steelers just kick their feet back and go, hey, we're happy with how we navigated this whole thing. We weren't going to be able to get this major difference-making quarterback in the free agent market. Maybe they were never in on Sam Darnold or anything like that. And so I guess they're probably in a spot where they just feel really good about getting a really good football player and not pigeonholing themselves into one position or another there at 21. So I do like it.
Agreed. No, I agree with that. I think it does. It frees them up. It frees them up for sure. I don't know that they'll be in a trade-up spot if they wanted to go that route for a quarterback, especially with giving away their second-round pick for Metcalf. But no, this is a good move for Pittsburgh and their defense because that's really the one. There was one major weakness. I'm looking at it now. Their corners were 30th in coverage grade last season. So we know they have an elite pass rush. We know they can control a game with their defensive line. They've got Minkah Fitzpatrick still at safety, but this was something they needed to fix, and you feel a lot better about it being Joey Porter Jr. and Darius Slay out there on the outside.
Ooh, last thing, correcting ourselves here. Deebo Samuel's deal is worth $54 million, not $30 million.
Paulson Adebo, yeah.
Yeah, so he's cashing out there. That's a lot better of a deal than the $10 million a year average that we previously read out.
Yeah, no,
right around
for
average.
Sure. Yeah.
Right around average for the cornerback position.
It shows you, I mean, where the Giants, it feels like the Giants, it's such a high sense of urgency, right, to win this year and to get better right now with this secondary and with the passing game on offense. So, like we mentioned with the Giants, we'll see where they go offensively and at quarterback, both in free agency and the draft. But trying to fix that secondary, I get it, because it was a problem. It's been a problem with some players that Drew Phillips is developing in the slot, but they really needed help on the outside, too. I think Adebo is a good fit there.
All right. This is only show number 1. We're coming to you every single day this week. We're doing a lot of different show content, whether it's these live shows here or whether we're going to have more detailed breakdowns of these conversations that we had here on the show. Appreciate everybody getting in on the chat. This is a ton of fun getting to break down free agency news with you guys. Tune back in tomorrow, 10 a.m. We're coming back to you at 10 a.m. tomorrow, and we're going to be back recapping so much of the news that we're going to see later this afternoon, later this evening, and tomorrow morning as well. We are shaping these teams and what they're going to be like for 2025 and the future, plus, of course, bringing in a draft angle and a draft conversation to all of this stuff as well. We will see you guys at 10 a.m. tomorrow. For Dalton Wasserman, I'm Trevor Sikkema saying thank you guys so much for watching the PFF NFL show. We'll see you guys then.